I think there is, among some of the population in Kentucky, a kind of a wistful yearning for some of the old timers, men and women, who could tell a good story and who could tell the old stories and maybe make them new.
He's traveled more than 1 million miles across Kentucky. From the Courier-Journal to Kentucky Living, from WHAS radio and TV to KET.
Swinging bridges are playful and full of mischief. They zig when you want to zag. They bob when you are weaving.
He's written and reported more than 5,000 stories about Kentucky and its people.
Mr. Mullins, what's this bridge meant to you?
It's meant a great deal to this whole community.
Byron Crawford is Kentucky's storyteller, and this is his story.
I always wondered what was the little story within the big story. That was kind of what I wanted to build my career around.
Byron doesn't just seem like one of us, he really is one of us, and I think that's what sets him apart from anybody else who's ever written about rural Kentucky. Is Byron really is from Crab Orchard, Kentucky, and even though it doesn't often show, it comes across if you talk to him for 10 minutes.
Where I grew up was an idyllic place for a kid who loved the out of doors as I do.
Byron was born in 1945 to Delbert and Lucille Crawford, a farm couple in Lincoln County, Kentucky.
You know, your neighbors sometimes would drop in unannounced just to visit. We raised tobacco, milked cows, had a few cattle, raised some corn, and I had the run of all of that territory. Fences didn't mean much to us in those days, so I just roamed through the creeks and streams and woods and briar patches from daylight to dark sometime. And I think it gave my imagination a real chance to develop. I can remember the desk, I remember the window in the school. We were on the second floor. I can remember when everybody else was supposed to be working, and I was too. I had my eye on this fence line of woodlands off in the distance, dreaming about maybe what was in there and wishing that I could get in there.
Byron was a running back on the Stanford High School football team and president of the Stanford chapter of the Future Farmers of America. Career day at the high school led to a class trip to a local radio station.
And when I read the news, I read it the way the guys did, I thought, on radio, and who I'd listened to. And the guy said, "Hey, you might like to do this."
Byron was on the air. It didn't take long for a Danville radio station to take notice and hire him away.
And I was off to the races.
After 1 year studying speech and broadcasting at Murray State University, it happened again.
I'd taken a summer job at WEKY Radio in Richmond, Kentucky.
Byron's coverage of a Westinghouse strike got the attention of Wacky Radio in Louisville.
WAKY, Jetstream News.
Kentucky's congressional delegation cast a 5-2 vote yesterday in favor.
It was 1966, a big year for the young broadcaster, marrying his high school sweetheart, Jackie Downs.
He was kind of the class clown. He made he tormented me through 6 years of school. And only at the very end, I gave up. I said, okay. And we started dating like the last part of our senior year and got married when we were both really, really young. And he got a job at Wacky. And we were gonna make $100 a week. So we were rich. And so that's when we decided to get married. And that was 50 years ago, so.
Congratulations.
I tell people it's 47 of the best years of my life.
This is Byron Crawford. It's a music-powered 60 Degrees on the Bill Crisp Show.
WAKY.
2 years later, Byron and Jackie began a family that would grow to 4 children.
3 boys and a girl. Eric, Andrea was the second one, then Joe and Wesley.
He tells everybody I'm his younger brother, and they believe it. That's how good he still looks at this age.
In the late 60s, it was on to Cincinnati and WCKY Radio, interviewing budding legends.
Good evening, this is Frank Gifford. Worldwide Sports welcomes CBS Radio's news station in Cincinnati, WCKY, and Byron Crawford, who talk with Johnny Bench.
This was the third major award won by Bench in his brief career.
Byron would also serve as a disc jockey and television anchor with an Armed Forces Network Reserve unit. Even as he moved up in the broadcast world, Byron's Lincoln County roots were always with him.
He applied for a job at some big station and was talking with some other applicant, and the applicant was sort of lording it over him, and his country boy, and the guy said he went to Yale or Harvard or Columbia or something like that, and Byron said, well, I went to Stanford.
This is WHAS News. The time is 6:31.
In 1973, it was on to WHAS Radio in Louisville, where Byron was a part of the historic coverage of the 1974 super outbreak of deadly tornadoes.
Good gracious sakes alive.
Governor Ford indicated to us that he is trying to divide up the National Guardsmen around the state as best he can to see that all areas which suffered serious damage receive relief, especially those areas where the damage could result in some looting and what have you.
Byron would soon move over to WHAS TV.
Our resident expert on the unusual, Byron Crawford, is back off the beaten path again tonight.
Lucian's an expert with a bow and arrow. He makes them himself with his own precision instruments for balancing the arrow shafts. The fine bows Lucian's made of Osage orange and red cedar would be coveted by any bow hunter.
Now, this is just a slow ballad. There's a golden land of dreams.
He anchored and reported the news, but it was Byron's work as a feature reporter that would set the course for the rest of his career.
The rainbow bright.
You must be a tennis player.
No, that's my bumblebee bat.
A camouflage hat, which he wore one winter day to keep warm, was such a hit with Channel 11 viewers that it became, for several years, his trademark on Side Roads, the syndicated feature series on stations across Kentucky, Ohio, and Tennessee.
What kind of attendant does he make?
Oh, good one. He tells you a lot of tall tales.
Yeah, we call it lying someplace.
Yeah, you just believe about half what he says.
In 1979, those side roads led to the Courier-Journal, where Byron took over the newspaper's legendary Kentucky column.
It's surprising how many people in the big cities in Kentucky still have connections and roots out in the state. So they're interested in stories from out there.
Over nearly 30 years, Byron crisscrossed Kentucky, writing, photographing, earning the trust and touching the hearts of Kentuckians everywhere, 500 words at a time.
So as I listened to those people tell stories as I was growing up, and the people I've met all over Kentucky, you take a little learning away from almost everyone you meet. Almost every interview, I came away with something that I had learned from that person.
Yeah, he took long swings through the state when he was with WHAS Television or with the Courier-Journal, and he went without a plan a lot of times. He knew where he was going. He didn't always know what he would find, but he always knew people wherever he went, and it will always stick with me that wherever we went, if we went with as a family or whatever the case was, we were usually the last people to leave because he was around talking to whoever or people coming up wanting to tell him one more story, and that was always the case whether we were at a church or at a speech he made or wherever we went.
By popular demand, some of Byron's most memorable columns are the basis of 3 books.
Finally, no tribute to Finch Rose would be complete without mention of honeysuckle, the mother of all sweet fragrances, the Chanel No. 5 of Old Finch Rose, the whisper of everyone you've ever loved, the line in every song that made you cry, the essence of every sunset and moonrise you've ever wanted to paint. Sometimes when I pass an old fence row blanketed with honeysuckle, I wish I was back there again, just learning to cross the fence. I've taken it seriously when people shared their personal, family, heartfelt stories with me. I've taken it personally that I need to really tell that story authentically. That it's not up to me to color it up. It's not up to me to make it better or worse than it is. It's just up to me to tell it the way they intended it to be told.
To my mind, Byron is really the ideal of what a good state columnist is. Someone who knows the state, knows the people, and knows how to tell a great story.
But he could tell a story in real terms, really understandable terms, without doing any embellishment or any altercation of the facts at all. He could dig up that level of detail, and I think that's a very rare talent to be able to do that.
Byron means a lot to all of us. He means a lot to his readers, and he means a lot to those of us who are also still in journalism and who he serves by example.
Good evening and welcome to Kentucky Life. I'm your host, Byron Crawford.
Midway through Byron's newspaper career, TV came calling again.
The best time to make maple syrup in Harlan County on Black Mountain is in February.
While still writing his column, Byron also hosted the Emmy Award-winning weekly Kentucky Life series on KET for 5 years.
Can I sample it?
I think you ought to taste of that.
This is a clean finger. I've saved that. What about it?
You have one more, and that's all.
I think he's a mirror for those of us who have a pride similar to his. And Byron is proud of rural Kentucky, and it just shows.
I will sing one song for my old Kentucky home.
In 2008, Byron called it a career at the Courier-Journal, but he still had stories to tell. In 2009, his byline first appeared in Kentucky Living magazine, writing about heroes of Kentucky's electric cooperatives. When his former WHAS colleague and good friend, legendary columnist David Dick, died 1 year later, Byron humbly accepted his latest assignment, the back page column of Kentucky Living that David Dick had written for 21 years.
And I've tried to keep my writing on that back page in the vein that I thought David would appreciate.
When Byron Crawford wrote our foreword to Home Sweet Kentucky, he said that David and Lolly Dick looked into Kentucky's eyes and saw clean through to her soul. But in Byron's case, I think that Byron took Kentucky by the hand and said, "Come over here, I want you to tell me a story."
In the pages of Kentucky Living, Byron has done just that, each month finding simple truths and profound meaning in the real-life stories of Kentuckians.
And I want this back page to be the people's chance to tell their stories. I'm just the guy who takes down the notes.
He made people slow down. His is a calming manner of writing that makes you want to curl up with a good book or just learn to sit there and listen to him.
I'm sure this award means as much to him as probably any you could give him, because these places mean a lot to him, and he took them seriously. He treated them like they were big-time stories, even though they weren't the front page news a lot of the times.
His family shared Byron Crawford with Kentucky, and he shared his family with us.
I wish I had it all over to do again with them, to have them as children again. It was a real party watching them grow up.
Just as he learned storytelling from his father's generation, Byron and Jackie's 6 grandchildren can learn from him.
Now he's just like their best friend. I mean, they come to him for advice, and he always has good advice for them. He's been devoted to Kentucky. He would never leave. He had job offers everywhere, and he would never leave the state. And I think he loves it, and I think Kentucky loves him.
It all began
29 years ago. I was born in a small town in central Kentucky. Nobody really thought I'd make much of myself. My parents really didn't have that much confidence in me. The teachers really didn't think I would do that well.
Remember, whenever important news breaks,
It was about 1964 when I really began to...
So I humbly take that mantle of storyteller and I'll run with it as long as I'm able to run. Then I'll drag myself up to the laptop and write another one.
Kentucky's Electric Cooperative's 2017 Distinguished Rural Kentuckian, Kentucky's Storyteller, Byron Crawford.